9th day of Chodesh Shvat, and we are learning Daf Tzadi Zayin Amud Aleph of Maseches Pesachim. We are 6 lines or so from the top of the page, just after the words Tiyufta Derava Tiyufta, where the Gemara turns its attention to a maimer of Shmuel. Says the Gemara, Amar Shmuel, Shmuel says, an interesting rule. Kol shebechatas mesa bepesach karev shlamim. Anytime that you have a chatas that is left to die, but Pesach, with regards to the Karban Pesach, if the same thing would happen to the Karban Pesach, Karev Shlamim would be brought as a Shlamim. We're going to discuss what those two dinim mean. V'chol shebechatas raya, and anytime that you have a chatas that is raya, meaning it is going to be left to grace until it develops a mum, but Pesach nami raya, it's also going to be left to develop a mum with regards to a Pesach, and then with those proceeds, you would buy another Karban. What exactly is this din of kol shebechatas mesa? So a person that has a Karban chatas, that something happens to it, that it was not able to be brought as a chatas, there's a din of chatas mesa, which means that you can't do anything with it. You can't even leave it to roam until it develops a mum. You basically lock it up until it dies, which is a terrible way for chatas to go, a terrible way for anything. But there are 5 cases, Rashi quotes, that you'd end up with a chatas mesa. What exactly are these dinim of a chatas mesa? This is learned halacha l'mashimisina. These 5 cases are if the chatas has a baby, meaning you have a female chatas that you didn't know that it was pregnant. You have vlad chatas before the baby was before the korban was offered, a baby was born. So that is one. It has kedusha, but you can't do anything with it. The second is a tmura of a chatas, tmuras chatas, which you can't be offered as a chatas because you didn't do another avera. I mean, you certainly shouldn't go ahead and do another avera, and it was only for this one. So tmuras chatas, and then there is a third case, which is meisubala. If you have somebody that is planning on bringing a chatas and dies, he consecrates, dedicates. His animal, and then he dies. Or a case of niskapur ba'aleh be'acheres. You have a case of niskapur ba'aleh al yidei acheres, that they dedicated an animal, and then that animal disappeared, and then they dedicated another animal. Then it was found. And then you have a 5th case, which is the avra shnasa, and that is only true of a sheep or a goat. But avra shnasa means it was a year old, and then it was not a year old anymore, and now it is no longer able to be brought as a chatas. Those are the 5 cases. And Shmuel is telling us anytime that you have one of those 5 cases, that by a chatas would be a mesa, by Pesach you would use that animal to bring it as a shlamim, meaning it defaults to shlamim. It's not a mesa. It's going to end up being brought as a shlamim. That is the shita of Shmuel. Now we already have to point out that of these 5 cases, not all of them can be true, because the first case that Rashi mentions here, which is vlad chatas, is impossible to happen by Pesach, because you cannot have a vlad Pesach. Pesach has to be a zachar, and you cannot have a vlad zachar. They don't have babies. So if you have a male korban, one of these 5 cases is not true. So you only have 4 left. So just keep that in mind for the moment, because we're going to challenge the rest of them as well, or at least in general. Says the Gemara as follows for Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, disagrees with Shmuel. Ein Pesach karev shlamim. Pesach is not going to be brought as a shlamim ela shenimtza achar shchita, unless in one case shenimtza achar shchita, if it was lost and then found again after the shchita of the replacement korban. But before the shchita, it's not going to be brought as a korban. It's not going to be brought as a korban shlamim, and we're going to figure out what Rabbi Yochanan is talking about a little bit later. Says the Gemara, attacking the shita of Shmuel, that the 5 cases that you'd have a chatas mesa, you'd have a Pesach that's brought as a shlamim. Says the Gemara, maskiv la Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef attacks Shmuel, and he says, "Uklalahu, is this really a rule? But we have a din of a chatas that got older than a year. It does not end up roaming around It doesn't get locked up until it does. It's roaming around until it develops a mum, and then you sell it and use that money. And use the money to buy another carbon, meaning not a personal carbon, a carbon for the Beis Hamikdash. That the Beis Hamikdash decides what to do with it. The Amar Rabbi Shimon Lakish tells us, if you have a chatas that is a year old, you see it as if it is standing in a graveyard. What's the value of seeing it as if it's standing in a graveyard? Means that the Kohen can't get to it. There's nothing wrong with it, but the Kohen cannot get to it, and therefore it cannot be brought. And therefore, Varoya, it's going to be left to graze. But if you have a Pesach in such a situation, it's going to be brought to Shlamim. It's going to be brought to Shlamim to Tanya, as we learned in the brisa that we saw yesterday. Im Kesev, if you want to bring a sheep, and the pasuk had said before, talking about Iminat Son Karbanai. So this whole pasuk is coming to tell us dinim about Karban Pesach. L'Rabbis is a Pesach la'aliyah to tell me that the Karban Pesach has to be brought, that the fat of the tail, the Karban Pesach is also brought in the Mizbech. When the pasuk says Im Kesef, L'Rabbis is a Pesach sha'avrish naseh. The Im Kesef tells me that that's included as that pasuk includes even a Pesach that is a year old, that is over a year old. Ushlamim habayim achmas Pesach, and any time that you have a shlamim that comes as a result of the fact that it was once a Pesach, l'chal mitzvah shlamim has all of the din of shlamim shutunim smicha. It needs smicha and chasim, and it requires wine to be poured in the mizbech with it. It's no for chasim v'shokin. You have to do the waving of the thigh and the breast. And when the pasuk then later on says im eis, that's the next sugya in the Torah. The Torah is telling me pause. That's pause in the halachas limit ala ish eintan aliyah to tell me that the carbon of a goat doesn't need the fat of the tail to be put in the mizbech. So, what is the basic premise of Rav Yosef's kasha? He's saying to Shmuel, I don't understand. You want to tell me that anytime that the chatas is left to graze, meaning it's put out to pasture until it develops a mum, the karban, the Pesach is going to be brought to the Shlamim. In the second statement of Shmuel, that's patently untrue. Patently untrue, because we have a brisa that says exactly opposite from you, Shmuel. It says that in a case where chatas would be a year old, that it would be sent to graze. You want to say that that the Pesach would also be sent to graze, and the brisa says the exact opposite. Then in that case, it would be offered as a shlamim. So Amalei, he says to him, Ki Ka'amar Shmuel, when Shmuel is teaching this din, we are radically going to reduce the scope of Shmuel's din. Ki Ka'amar Shmuel ba'avudim. Shmuel is only talking about animals that got lost. B'dchuyim loy amar. He's not talking about talking about d'chuyim, animals that could have been put in the mizbech and were bumped off for another reason. Meaning, originally we thought that Shmuel is talking about all similarities, aside from, I suppose, the case of Vlad Chatas, that Shmuel's din is talking about d'chuyim, meaning you had one animal, you switch it for another animal, and you still had the first animal that was present. We're having d'chuyim, meaning, and we're intentionally deciding not to offer this one. In that case, we would say the same thing. But Shmuel's not. But in that case, that's where the brisa is saying that this is against Shmuel. What Shmuel's really only talking about is ba'avudim, where you don't have both animals in front of you. In a chanami, you would agree. In the case where you have both animals in front of you, and one of them is a year old now, so then that would be the same. That's in a chanami. He agrees with the brisa that obviously that this animal that by a chatas would be put out to pasture, now it's going to be brought as a shlamim because they were both available at that point in time, and there's a reason that it wasn't put on the mizbech, and that's now because it's a year old. Says the Gemara, hold on a second. Va'avad mi mishkachas la? Hold on. Is this true about all lost animals? Shmuel's din still doesn't hold with all situations of lost animals. Says the Gemara, v'harei avuda b'shas hafrasha l'Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, we'll see this machlokes Rebbe and Rabbanan. According to the Rabbanan, in a case of an animal that got lost, b'shas hafrasha, at the time of at the time that you designated that you dedicated a replacement, dilariya azla, that the original karban is going to be put out to pasture. That case, which is oven, meaning it is lost at that point in time, this disagrees with Shmuel. Ditnan, because we have a mission in Tamura that tells us as follows: if you separated your chatas and then it got lost, and then you went and you were mafresh another animal in its place, and then you found the first one. So you have both of them in front of you. Both of them are there. The first one is supposed to be brought to the mizbeach, meaning one of them is brought to the mizbeach. Ushniya tamus, and the second one is left to die. Divrei Rebbe, that is the opinion of Rebbe, and this would be the case of Rebbe, meaning that Shmuel had spoken about. This case of Rebbe would be if you have an animal whose owner has been niskaper by another animal. In that case, it would be tamus, and according to Shmuel, in that case, it would be any case of misa by a chatas would be shlomim by a Pesach. However, the Chacham disagree. Ein chatas mesa, a chatas, this chatas, these two chatas that you have, ein chatas mesa, it's not left to die. Ela shenimtzeis le'achar sheniskaper balim, unless it was found after the balim have already achieved kapara. Meaning, if they were both there present at the point in time that he got kapara, meaning he offered one of them and the other one he didn't offer, so in that case, says Rebbe, the chatas that is still alive needs to die, and the Rabbanan say no. The Rabbanan disagree, unless it was found after the kapara was achieved. Hakoidem sheniskaper, but if it was found before kapara was achieved, sheniskaper balim, right? That's when you put it out to pasture. You don't have to have it die. You can put it out to pasture until it develops a mum and sell it and use that money for another korban. Ve'ila Pesach, but with regards to Pesach, if it was lost and found after chatzos, but before shchita, karev shlamim. Everybody agrees that it would be karev shlamim, and this is the opinion of Rabbi Zera that we saw on yesterday's Amud. That this would be the opinion of Rabbi Zera that it was found between chatzos and shchita. You haven't shechted your animal yet, but it's after the zman of shchita, and it was found at that point in time. It's going to be karev shlamim, which means that Shmuel is against the opinion of the Rabbanan. Says the Gemara, no problem. Shmuel karebi svirla. Yeah, when Shmuel said his rule, he said it only according to the opinion of Rebbe. He holds like Rebbe. He doesn't hold like the opinion of the Rabbanan. And according to Rebbe, the animal that is found before the balam on niskaper, that is not going to be put out to pasture. It's going to be left to die. And if that would happen in such a situation that you'd have both animals in front of you after chatzos and before shchitas Pesach, so then Shmuel says, yeah, and that's exactly my din. And in such a situation, the second, the animal that's not offered, or the second one, first of all, whichever one is not offered, is going to be brought as a shlamim. Says the Gemara, Shmuel holds like Rebbe that says that the last one is going to be put to death. Well, it's going to be left to die. You can't put it to death. That would be bizu kachim. You have to leave it to die because you can't really do anything else with it. Says the Gemara, V'hakol avuda l'Rebbe mesa. Whoa. Is it really true that any time that you have a lost animal, according to Rebbe, it's going to be left to die? Ve'ila bePesach, with regards to Pesach, according to Rebbe, the din is by a Pesach, if it was lost before Chatzos, and then it was found again before Chatzos. You lost it in the morning, you dedicated another animal, and then you found the first one still in the morning. In that case, Raya, you would leave it to graze. And that even Rabbi Zera agrees, because both animals are present before shchita, meaning neither of them are lost, right? Meaning that lost animal is not really lost. Says the Gemara, yeah, Kodim Chatzos Lav Avadu, because before Chatzos, it doesn't have a din of Avod, meaning there's the functional having it being lost. Now, I don't know where the animal is, but that doesn't have a din of Avod. It's not called lost. It's not lost. It's lost only when the time of the korban comes. If you don't have it, if you don't know where it is, ran away, you got mingled into the flock, and you can't recognize. Now it's Avod. Now it's Avod. You don't know where it is. But if by the time the korban comes, the time of the korban arrives, you have both of them in front of you, then it's not called Avod. It's not called lost. Like the opinion of Rabbi, the Amar Rabbi says, Avedas Laila Lav Shma Aveda, that an Aveda, if an animal is lost at night, if a Pesach was lost at night, it's not called lost. It's called not there in front of me. But if by the time Shechita Pesach, Chatzos Yom comes the next day and I found it, then it's not called lost. And then the Gemara now challenges, okay, bottom line of Tzadi Zaina Amud Aleph, we've boxed Rebbe into a corner here, which is, how are you ever going to find a case of a chatas that is how are you ever going to find a case, according to Rebbe, of an animal that is going to be put out to pasture? Meaning, if Shmuel is saying this within the din of Rebbe, so a chatas, where are you ever going to have an ovid by a chatas that is going to be that is going to be left out to pasture? Because Rebbe because Rashi in the bottom Rashi of the page. So Elorei Rebbe ba'avudim, meaning a lost animal. Heichim mishkachas, says Rashi. How are you ever going to find it? The tikkun kol shebachatas roei d'shmuel, meaning that you're going to have a case of all of the chatas that are sent out to pasture. By Pesach is also going to be sent out to pasture, because the only case of a lost chatas, according to Rebbe, that would be left to graze, be left to be rare, is if it was a lost chatas at night. Because by the next morning, right, meaning it was lost at night, and by the next morning you still haven't found it. But according to Shmuel, that cannot be the case, because if you have a Pesach that's lost at night, it's not lost yet. So where is the case that Shmuel could be referring to, that Rebbe holds that a lost chatas would have a chatas that's sent out to pasture, that's not left to die, sent to pasture, would be the same din of Roya by Pesach? We don't have such a case. We've now boxed in Shmuel and Rebbe to this situation. What could Shmuel possibly be referring to? And that is the question that the Gemara Be'ezra Mizbarach is going to pick up with tomorrow, with the beginning Da'amar Rebbe Oshia, which, please God, we will explain tomorrow, because it's going to get a little bit chunky. So we'll leave it with the question for right now. And Be'ezra Mizbarach, we will continue tomorrow. Looking forward, please God, to seeing then. And everybody should have a wonderful day.